At Europe's western edge, researchers opened a genetic time capsule. They recovered genome-wide data from 67 people buried across Portugal, spanning 5,000 years from late prehistory to the 19th century. Those individuals reveal movement, survival, and unexpected connection. The results reject a simple parade of conquerors. Older ancestry survived new arrivals. Steppe-related ancestry reached Portugal later and less strongly than much of Iberia. A Roman town linked Europe with Africa and the eastern Mediterranean, and medieval graves reveal a striking north-south divide. But first, what does an ancient genome actually tell us? The researchers screened remains from 94 people. They favored dense petrous bone and teeth, cleaned the material, extracted damaged fragments, and tested for contamination. 67 samples passed the thresholds for genome-wide analysis, including characteristic damage that helps authenticate genuinely ancient DNA. These are not perfect modern genomes read from beginning to end. The team enriched selected positions across the genome, then compared the surviving variants with other ancient and present-day datasets. Principal component analysis shows broad genetic affinities, statistical tests detect excess shared ancestry, and models such as QPADM ask which reference populations can plausibly explain a sample. Those reference populations are measuring tools, not literal tribes hiding inside a person. A model labeled Anatolian Neolithic means ancestry related to sampled early farmers from Anatolia. It does not mean every ancestor came from one village. And a Y chromosome or mitochondrial lineage follows only one narrow paternal or maternal path, never the whole family tree. That distinction matters because archaeology, language, political identity, and genetic ancestry can overlap without being identical. A grave labeled Roman describes a period and context. It does not guarantee that the buried person had ancestry from Italy. With that rule in place, the Portuguese evidence becomes more surprising and much more human. The first chapter centers on Cova das Lapas in central western Portugal. The study produced new data from 10 middle or late Neolithic individuals there, plus a later Chalcolithic individual from the same site. Their genomes fall between local Iberian hunter-gatherers and early farmers related to populations from Anatolia. In one accepted model, the Neolithic Cova das Lapas group was about 3/4 Anatolian farmer-related, with the remainder modeled from Iberian and other Western hunter-gatherer sources. That is a result for this sampled group under this model. It is not a timeless percentage for all Portuguese people. The mixture began long before these particular burials. Farming reached central and southern Portugal around 5500 BCE, carried through Mediterranean networks along with herding, pottery, and more permanent settlement. Yet the genetic transition was not a clean replacement. Local hunter-gatherer ancestry entered farming communities and remained visible thousands of years later. The new data even preserved family structure. At Cova das Lapas, researchers identified a pair of male siblings and another paternal second-degree relationship. Male pairs were on average more closely related than female pairs or mixed pairs. Together with diverse maternal lineages, that pattern may indicate communities in which women moved more often than men. The authors are careful here. 10 Neolithic individuals from one burial complex cannot define an entire society. Limited sampling makes paternal diversity difficult to measure, and burial customs decide whose DNA survives. The pattern supports possible patrilocality, not a universal rule for Neolithic Portugal. Across Iberia, the team also detected a geographical tendency. Older Magdalenian-associated hunter-gatherer ancestry appeared to persist more strongly toward the Atlantic and southwest than near the Pyrenees. Portugal, at the far western end, may have preserved more of that deeper ancestry as farming spread. But this gradient is subtle. Its statistical strength depends on which sites contain a detectable signal, and the model explains only part of the variation. The honest conclusion is not that southern Portuguese people carry a pure Ice Age component. It is that geography influenced how older and newer populations mixed, and more samples could change the map. The next major signal comes from ancestry, ultimately connected to pastoralist populations north of the Black and Caspian Seas. Across Europe, steppe-related ancestry expanded during the 3rd millennium BCE. In Portugal, the earliest detectable traces appear at low levels in some Chalcolithic sites associated with bell beaker material culture. Even that first appearance needs caution. One statistical test detected the signal in most Portuguese bell beaker associated individuals, while QPRDM did not consistently confirm every model, and the demographic effect was still limited. Bell beaker objects, burial practices, and long distance contacts could spread without every community sharing the same ancestry. The largest shift arrived in the Bronze Age. The study added 11 individuals from three southern sites, Monte da Cabida, Torrevieja, and Utero Alto. Steppe-related affinity now appeared broadly, while becoming weaker toward southern and southwestern Iberia. Portugal was affected, but less strongly than regions closer to the northeastern entry route. This is where an older Iberia-wide result needs refinement. A major 2019 study estimated that by about 2000 BCE, roughly 40% of Iberian ancestry and almost all earlier Y chromosome lineages had been replaced. The Portugal-specific data show that this continental scale headline was regionally uneven at Europe's Atlantic edge. Portuguese Bronze Age V lineages also changed dramatically. Yet when the researchers compared ancestry on the autosomes with the X chromosome, they found no evidence that steppe-related ancestry arrived through men alone. A paternal line turnover can look nearly complete, even while the rest of the genome records a more balanced and continuous history. Continuity is visible at the level of individual places. People from Chalcolithic and Bronze Age Torrevieja clustered closely, and maternal lineages associated with earlier Iberian and farming populations persisted. New ancestry entered the region, but communities with local roots did not simply vanish. Some Bronze Age models also hint at Mediterranean connections before the Phoenician colonial period. Torrevieja showed affinities that could be modeled with Central Mediterranean or deeper Eastern proxies. The authors present maritime contact as a possibility, not a solved migration route. Trade can move objects without people, and genetic proxies are not passports. The Iron Age leaves an awkward blank. Cremation was widespread, so the project obtained no new Portuguese Iron Age genomes. That missing evidence matters. It prevents a seamless genetic bridge from the Bronze Age to the Roman conquest, and makes simple claims about Celtic or pre-Roman Portuguese DNA especially risky. The record sharpens again at Idanha Villa, a Roman period town in central eastern Portugal. 6 unrelated people were analyzed there. Their results do not form a single Roman genetic type. Some retain strong local Iberian ancestry. Others shifted toward Italy, the Eastern Mediterranean, or North Africa. 3 women were best modeled with a local source, plus an Eastern Mediterranean or North African source. 2 other individuals showed especially clear African-related affinity. The sample is tiny, but its diversity fits Idana Avela's position on routes linking major cities of Roman Lusitania. Archaeology supplies the social texture that DNA alone cannot import. African ceramics showed trade, inscriptions record soldiers and labor, mausoleums of Italic tradition suggest elite movement, Greek names may point to freed people or enslaved people from elsewhere in the empire. A Roman town was a network, not an ethnicity. After Western Roman authority collapsed, 4 early medieval genomes add another layer. One woman from Idanha, Avelha, had a strong affinity with Central European Iron Age and Germanic period groups, consistent with movement associated with Visigothic rule. But the other individuals carried different combinations of local, North African, and Eastern Mediterranean ancestry. 4 people cannot represent every Suebi or Visigoth community. The safest result is narrower. Central European ancestry reached at least some people in early medieval Portugal, while ancestry already established during Roman times continued beside it. Political change added diversity without resetting the population. The clearest regional contrast appears in medieval graves. The study analyzed 9 individuals from Islamic burial contexts at Santarém and Luli, and 4 from Christian contexts farther north and inland. The Islamic-associated individuals generally shifted toward African reference populations compared with contemporary Christian-associated samples. At the southern Lul sites, models indicated additional sub-Saharan African ancestry at low levels in several people, while one unusual individual was modeled at roughly 40%. At 9th century Santarém, the best model assigned about 26% North African-related ancestry. These numbers describe particular ancient individuals, not modern regional averages. The labels also require care. Islamic burial does not equal one ancestry, and Christian burial does not equal another. Religion, law, family migration, enslavement, trade, and conversion all shaped who entered each cemetery. The genomes reveal connections across Africa and the Mediterranean, not two biologically separate populations. In northern Christian contexts, the study found stronger continuity with early medieval local populations and much less evidence of new Islamic period gene flow. Castro de Avelas near the Douro showed little major genetic change across the sampled periods. The political frontier moved, but ancestry in this northern community remained comparatively stable. Farther south, African-related ancestry did not disappear when Christian kingdoms took control. 13th and 18th century sites remained broadly continuous with medieval Portuguese populations, while some models still required African-related sources. The genetic effect of migration could outlast the government, language, or religious authority under which it began. This is the video's central answer. Northern Portugal was not untouched, and southern Portugal was not replaced. The difference is one of degree, timing, and local history. Longer connections with Islamic-ruled networks in the south produced additional African admixture, while the north preserved stronger continuity from earlier medieval communities. Modern genomes offer a separate, incomplete comparison. A 2019 study, based mainly on Spain, found fine-scale Iberian structure and regionally varying Northwest African-related ancestry in one combined analysis, Portuguese samples grouped with Galicia, but that dataset cannot turn medieval cemetery results into exact percentages for people living in Portugal today. The final burials make the story personal. Two men buried at Abrantes during the Napoleonic occupation looked different genetically. One matched medieval and present-day French reference groups. The other combined French-related and African-related ancestry. Even inside one army, one place, and one historical moment, individual lives resisted a single label. Ancient DNA has the same limitation everywhere. The people we can sample are not a national census. Cemeteries may represent families, soldiers, elites, migrants, religious communities, or people denied other burials. Models depend on the reference groups available. A percentage is an estimate within a chosen comparison, not a permanent ingredient label. An ancestry is not identity. Genetic similarity can reveal population connections, but it cannot decide whether somebody considered themselves Lusitanian, Roman, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, African, or Portuguese. Those identities were created through language, law, kinship, belief, memory, and choice, as well as descent. That brings us to surnames. A surname can be a valuable genealogical clue, but it is not a genetic barcode. It may preserve a place, an occupation, a patronymic, or a religious history. Yet it normally follows one paper line, while your genome comes from an expanding web of ancestors. For family research, begin with records, births, marriages, parish registers, migration documents, and the oldest verified locations. Then use autosomal matches to test recent relationships. The chromosome or mitochondrial tests can examine one direct paternal or maternal line. None of these tools can prove that a surname is Roman, Moorish, Celtic, or Sephardic by itself. So who are the Portuguese according to these 67 genomes? They are not the biological remains of one founding tribe. Neolithic communities mixed incoming farmer ancestry with older Iberian ancestry. Bronze Age migrants added steppe-related ancestry without erasing local roots. Roman networks connected inland Portugal to Europe, Africa, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Early medieval movement added Central European ancestry to an already diverse population. Later Islamic period connections left stronger African signals in parts of the south, while northern communities showed greater continuity. Those African connections persisted beyond political conquest, becoming part of later Portuguese history rather than a temporary foreign layer. Portugal's position at the end of continental Europe created the paradox. It could preserve older ancestry because every migration had farther to travel. But its Atlantic coast and Mediterranean links also connected it to distant people. Isolation and movement were not opposites. Together they produced the regional mosaic revealed in the graves. The most accurate answer is therefore not a list of conquerors. Portuguese genetic history is a record of continuity through connection, local communities enduring, newcomers joining them, and the balance changing from north to south and century to century. 67 genomes do not close the case. They finally give Portugal a stronger beginning. If you wanted their next country's origin story investigated with the same evidence first approach, subscribe and tell us which population should be examined next.